Euphoria, one of today's most popular shows, added a new character named Elliot for its season 2. He carries his guitar around him and he does this performance during the season finale that a lot of people on social media had mixed responses to. But at least that wasn't something he just picked up for the show. Elliot is played by Dominic Fike, a musician who signed a $4 million record deal with Columbia Records 4 years before he first got that TV role. His song 3 Nights has over 1 billion streams on Spotify, and he's had a couple big songs more recently as well. Well, some people might not have known his music before he got that big role. He was already probably pretty close to set for life off music before he even started acting. Dominic Fike is one of the latest in a long line of musicians who have stepped in front of the big screen. Ludacris is so successful in the Fast and Furious franchise that there are probably some people who don't even think of him as the guy who owns at least 23 platinum plaques from his music career. There are so many other examples of musicians leaving the studio and going to the movie studio, I guess. We don't even have to leave the Fast and Furious franchise, because Tyrese is another example. It seems like going from being a successful musician to being a successful actor is a path well tread enough that most people don't really think twice about it when they see their favorite artist pop up in a movie. But what about the other way around? It's certainly been done before. In fact, Drake, one of the most commercially successful rappers ever, got his start as an actor on the Canadian teen drama series Degrassi. But for some reason, that switch is perceived to be much less common. And sure, there's like the more niche example of child stars going on to become music stars, especially in like the Disney cinematic universe. That's been a thing going back to the Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears Mickey Mouse Club days, and it continues today with the Sabrina Carpenters and the Olivia Rodrigos that we're seeing right now. There are even newer acts like Group Therapy, who I was randomly once in this tequila commercial with, where the members all met as kids doing acting gigs. But outside of the child star circuit, it's a bit harder to come up with examples of actors going into the studio and becoming successful musicians. That's led to the commonly held belief that it's easier to go from music to acting than from acting to music. And I want to unpack that. Is that actually true? Or is it maybe more common for some other reasons? Is there something inherent about the way that we perceive musicians and we perceive actors that makes this the case? Along the way, I'll go through some examples of people who have actually succeeded in music after succeeding in acting, and I'll talk to a musician actor friend that I think is very qualified to talk about this kind of thing. But before we get into all that, if you like videos on music like this one, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe. I post a video every week. If you want to see them early, go to my Instagram, HADJI Gaviota, throw me a follow, and join my broadcast channel. I post the links to all my videos one day early in there for free. Also, if you ever have an idea for a video topic, throw it in the comments. I might just do it. For example, this was literally a comment on last week's video, and I was like, hey, that's actually a good idea, and here we are. So if you want to see me talk about something, let me know, because I might actually do it. And lastly, I wanted to say thanks for all the support on my latest single, Like Water. It's been one of my best first weeks of a song in a really long time, so I really appreciate that. I appreciate all the really nice comments on my video. The whole album is coming really soon, and if you're in New York, I just announced the release show, December 3rd, Baby's Alright in Brooklyn. It's with a couple other really dope artists, Just End and Shannon Summers. I would love to see you guys there. I got the ticket link in the bio. There will be merch. It's gonna be a great time. See you there. Back to the video. Now, the reason for the overlap between these two industries in the first place is pretty obvious. The music and film industries have plenty in common. Both are generally based out of Los Angeles, which goes a long way towards making connections and fostering the types of relationships that would allow you to dip your toes into the other pool. Beyond that, both industries rely on the expertise of the other to succeed. For example, most successful musicians shoot music videos. And while not everybody is going to shoot like a high budget one, if they do, they're probably going to be working with directors, gaffers, VFX people who all also work in the film and TV industry. And on the flip side, what's a movie or a TV show without some music in it? You'd be hard pressed to find an A-list movie that doesn't have music by some artists synced into it at some point. Sync, by the way, is the word for like when an artist has their music placed in a movie, a TV show, a commercial, a video game, something like that. It's actually something that I'm going to be looking into in another video pretty soon. Just waiting on something cool to happen. Hint, hint. But yeah, I mean, like, think about the songs that were in like the Shrek movies, like the Smash Mouth cover of I'm a Believer. I don't know why that's the example that comes to my mind of like a sync, but I don't know what that says about me. Sure, some movies might not have big recognizable songs, but at the very least, they probably have scores and background music and stuff like that. And of course, that stuff is created by musicians. And at the absolute minimum, even if the movie has no score, no sounds, added, besides the people talking, they still have a whole crew of sound engineers to make sure that that talking sounds good, you know? And chances are those people work in the music industry as sound engineers as well. So the industries are obviously constantly intermingling and doing business with each other, to say nothing of all the social mingling that they probably do at those Hollywood Hills parties and whatnot. In addition, artists, especially bigger ones, get acting experience and they get used to being in front of the screen because of how much time they have to spend in front of the screen doing music videos, doing press, all that kind of stuff. So it's natural for them to get curious about the idea of doing acting seriously. If they already live in LA, they wouldn't even have to move to try out the new career. It's not like they're trying to get into oil rigging or Alaskan deep sea fishing, you know? To a certain point, musicians becoming actors is almost like the result of convenience. The result of gravity kind of just pulling them together. And it's not like the intermingling between these two worlds is something that was just brought on by convenience or by geography. Music and theater have been intertwined since the ancient days. Before things were filmed and recorded, they were performed. And being a performer meant there was a pretty good chance that you were doing some acting and doing some singing. Once people could record and sell music, and once people could film movies and then sell tickets to you, then things started to specialize a little bit more. And so there is no doubt that it seems easier to come up with examples of musicians becoming actors than the other way around. Beyond all the people that I've already named, you got people like Will Smith, Awkwafina, Ice Cube, Ice-T, LL Cool J, and Mark Wahlberg. In some of these cases though, especially like Awkwafina, you can argue that the vertical mobility they had in the film industry was maybe higher than what they had in the music industry. I'm not trying to disrespect like My Vag, but that song probably was not going to be on the radio, you know? And then there are tons of musicians who have jumped into these big acting roles and then went right back to being superstars in music, like Beyonce and Justin Timberlake. But if you rack your brain for actors who became big-time musicians, it might be a little bit harder to come up with names. That doesn't mean they don't exist, though. And we don't even have to dig for obscure or old examples. There's a great one from this year. Joe Keery is best known for his role as Steve Harrington on the Netflix series Stranger Things. And acting, at least outwardly, was always his first love and his first focus. He graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Acting from the theater school at DePaul University in Chicago. And he got smaller roles in shows like Empire and Chicago Fire, a couple commercials, and a little under 2 years after graduating, he was cast in the show Stranger Things. And the rest is history. I mean, that show is so gigantic. Well, so much of his notoriety came from acting. He had been playing music the entire time as well. He was in a psych rock band called Post Animal, and it wasn't just a bunch of kids messing around in a garage, like they were really good. And they still are really good. Joe left the band in 2019 because of his acting schedule, but in 2020 without him they opened for Cage the Elephant. And as far as I can tell, they're still chugging along today. Joe by himself had been releasing solo music as Joe, which sounds like Joe, but it's spelled D-J-O, since 2019 when he dropped his debut single Roddy. Atwood magazine covered the release at the time, calling it a swirly, psychedelic pop rock number. It wasn't a secret that this was Joe Keery from Stranger Things. It was also covered by Billboard though, so people knew. People were talking about it. He put out some more singles in 2019 and 2020, and then dropped an album called Decide in 2022. Pitchfork gave the album a 6.8, which is pretty good by their standards, and acknowledged the elephant in the room with the first line. Joe Keery knows what you were probably thinking. Another actor with a musical side project? Ugh. To Keery's credit, making music is more than a passing vanity project. There's an interesting tidbit in there that actors might be known to have musical projects, but they're seen as these vanity things, as these like, ugh, he's doing something that nobody's going to want to hear. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But the review basically says that while the music is good, we don't learn too much about Keery himself. Judging off the vibe in some later interviews, part of this seemed to be at least intentional. He didn't want to be like, hey, I'm the actor guy. He wanted the music to speak for itself. Tucked in at the end of the review is a quick sidebar. One lovely exception to that is End of Beginning, with its lyrics about returning to Chicago and reconnecting with a past version of himself. I'm sure the author of the review, Quinn Moreland, feels pretty smart in retrospect for picking that song out in particular, because in 2024, it went randomly viral and like mega viral on TikTok, leading to over 1 billion streams and counting, and a peak position of number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100. I'd venture to say that a pretty solid chunk of the people who are streaming End of Beginning and making TikToks to it are unaware that this is Steve from Stranger Things. And rather than drive the conversation of the song in the first place, it serves as a fun novelty fact. That type of pleasant surprise is received much better than finding out that the guy you like and trust for doing one thing is now trying to do a completely different medium. I think Joe's career is a really interesting example for us to analyze the relationship between the actor and the musician careers at play. He plays a character on a family-friendly, all-time popular Netflix show, but his music is a little bit more niche, more psychedelic, and particular, even if one of those songs ended up having like big-time crossover potential. When famous artists become actors, most immediately recognize them as a familiar face. And sometimes that's probably the point of casting them in the first place. The audience is open and welcoming to the idea of seeing this musician now in a movie. But are they as interested in seeing their favorite actors make music? Donald Glover, aka Childish Gambino, is probably the best example of someone making it out of movies and TV and having a successful music career. His first attention came as a member of the YouTube comedy troupe Derek Comedy, which he managed to parlay into a writing gig for the NBC sitcom 30 Rock. From there, he landed a role on camera in the cult classic NBC sitcom Community, which ran from 2009 to 2014. His first mixtape as Childish Gambino was released in 2008, and he gained some attention on the 2010 mixtape Cul-de-sac, but in 2011 it was the song Freaks and Geeks that really opened him up to a bigger audience. He signed a record deal and then dropped his album Camp later on that year in 2011, which didn't get the best reception from places like Pitchfork, but it gained him a cult fan base and it spawned some of his biggest songs like Heartbeat and LES. In 2013, he announced he was stepping away from Community. This has often been misinterpreted as him leaving the show to pursue music, but he himself said otherwise in a note he shared that year on Instagram. "I didn't leave Community to rap. I don't want to rap. I want it to be on my own. I've been sick this year. I've seen a bunch of people die this year. This is my first time I felt helpless. But I'm not on that. Kept looking for something to be in with. Follow someone's blueprint, but you have to be on your own." Despite all the personal trouble that he went through in 2013 per that note, he released a project that year that would change his musical trajectory with Because the Internet. He started to win some of the people over who clowned him for projects like Camp. As a Childish Gambino scholar, I'd personally argue that the tides really started to turn in 2012 with the mixtape Royalty, and honestly, in doing this video, it made me realize I want to make a video about that. If that's something that you want to see, drop it in the comments. But regardless, this video is not meant to be a Childish Gambino deep dive. I just wanted to show that he never really gave up either music or film. He just straddled both of them like a crazy person. Because 3 years after that note, and after he left Community, his own series, Atlanta, premiered to rave reviews. But rather than go from there and lean just into acting or directing or writing, he dropped an album, Awaken My Love, that same year in 2016, which again featured two of his biggest tracks, Me and Your Mama and Redbone. These vintage funk R&B songs that were a massive departure from like the nasally raps of his early career. He continued throughout the decade to just straddle both and really get bigger in both worlds at the same time somehow. Although supposedly in 2024 he has officially retired the Childish Gambino moniker. But again, that doesn't mean he's done making music. So we'll just have to see. Either way, I think it's best to view Donald Glover as a true unicorn, like a complete polymath, not somebody that is like necessarily an example that anybody can follow. I think it would be great to see more people like Donald Glover. I just don't know if everybody has that in them. He's definitely not like the baseline for most actor turned musicians. He is another example of someone who had that like novelty fun fact aspect to their two careers, just like Joe. Early in the 2010s, if you knew him as a rapper first, you might be shocked to find out that he was the guy on Community. And then if you watched Community, you might be shocked to find out that that guy was a rapper who had fans. There are some more things to peel away from the Donald Glover story. I don't think anybody would tell a musician not to take a big acting role. Everyone seems to acknowledge that that would probably be good for their career. And people seem kind of excited to see their favorite artist step in front of the screen. But I don't think it's the same for actors who want to take their music career seriously. Look at this Reddit thread from the Community subreddit after Donald announced he was leaving the show. Why did Donald Glover quit? It seems like he would realize that this is his place to show his talent. Is his music career taking off or something? And then there were plenty of comments in the replies that were kind of questioning his talent in music, if he really had what it took to make it as an artist. So I was curious and I went looking to see if people said the same thing about Dominic Fike when they announced that he was joining Euphoria. Sure enough, I found some Reddit posts in his subreddit from when it was announced, and people were excited to see him on the show. Nobody was like, oh man, his music is the place to show his talent. Is he even a good enough actor? Even on the Euphoria subreddit where people would be like less biased, people seemed open to the idea of watching him act. The stark contrast between those two reactions just kind of stuck with me. And just like Joe, even though he's had these huge crossover moments in his career, Donald Glover himself has made public comments that acknowledge the nicheness of his music, or at least of his taste in music. In a stand-up routine in 2011, he said, "I like music a ton, but the problem is I like weird stuff. I like weird, crazy music. Weird people making music. But as an adult, we're not really allowed to be weird anymore. The older you get, the less you can take weird stuff." I think that Atlanta is a show that's gleefully weird in like a good way, but it's fair to say that most of his acting roles, especially his more recent ones, like Mr. and Mrs. Smith or his roles in the Star Wars or Lion King franchises, they feel decidedly less weird than his music does. Even when his songs have gotten massively popular, it's not necessarily because they were like engineered to be that way. I'm not sure that anyone would have predicted that like a funkadelic revival album in 2016 would spawn the biggest hit of his career in Redbone. Even in his earlier days, he definitely had an outsider status as a rapper, which is like what so much of camp is about if you listen to the lyrics. And even though being on a show like Community is not exactly like A-list stuff in the film and TV world, it's decidedly less outsider to star on an NBC sitcom than it was for him to be rapping about the stuff that he was rapping about in the context of the rap world back then. Does that make sense? I have experience as a musician, but I don't have much as an actor. So I figured it would make sense to check in with somebody who actually has experience doing both. So I asked my friend Lala. Lala and I met in the Tidal Rising artist program last year, and she makes really great music, but she's also a very established actress. She's done Broadway plays, and she's played roles in movies like Chris Rock's Top 5, Spike Lee's Son of the South, the Netflix series The Politician, and the TV series Are We There Yet? So I asked Lala, you think it's true that it's easier for musicians to become actors than it is for actors to become musicians? And she gave an answer so good that it made me think she should probably just be the one who's making the video. Definitely true. I think we're so used to seeing cameos in film and TV that we're able to process a familiar face on screen, making it a smoother transition. Plus, the musicians you see become actors tend to usually be pretty good, and I think that's because with acting you have to get in. People who are making these projects are putting their name and reputation, money and time into these things, so they need them to be able to keep up with the actors that have been doing this forever. I think with actors doing music, it tends to remind us of Disney in the sense of every child star being pushed into that career after their big moment. Not saying that's bad or that they're bad, I just think that audiences feel like it's more forced upon us, making it harder to get people's attention even when the music is good. Sidebar, I mean, think about Sabrina Carpenter. She's been putting out music for 10 years and it took this long for her to get popular even though she was on a very big Disney series. I think that's why the ones with the most success are the people that go under different aliases, i.e. Childish Gambino, Wallows, Joe, because for some reason it influences people's opinion when they know, rather than that pleasantly surprised feeling of, oh my god, that's them, that they can now share with their friends as a fun fact. To sum it up, I think artists have a privilege that once they've had a certain level of success and hit mainstream, to reach a somewhat celebrity status, it's easier for us as consumers to take in seeing them everywhere. We're used to it with other celebrities, whereas everyone has different music tastes, and that can even be a very niche, slim market for an actor to transition to music, as it might not fit everyone's liking in the same way, and they have to start out like the rest of us indies unless they have insane cult followings. I mean, took the words right out of my mouth. We talked about a lot of this in the video already, especially the aspects of niche in music, the power of the alias when we talk about Joe and Childish Gambino versus their acting careers, and the pleasant surprise of finding out rather than being force-fed it from the gate. One thing that I feel like should be a big piece of this conversation is the fundamental misunderstanding that I feel like people have about both art forms. I think acting is perceived to be about image and presentation, and while that's absolutely a part of it, there's a whole skill, there's a whole art to doing it, and it's not easy. Like, there's more to just looking at the movie screen and going, oh, that's Ludacris, I know him from Moneymaker. And I think music is perceived to be this thing that only has to do with skill by the consumers. People are like, oh, my favorite artists are my favorite artists because they make the best music. But a lot of the times, I think a big reason why we like our favorite artists has more to do with image than we might admit, or than we might even know ourselves. For a lot of people, it's about the image and the lifestyle that they project. And in our society, both of these art forms are packaged and commodified and marketed in a way to try to get us to click on Netflix or click on Spotify or buy that movie ticket on the Fandango app. And in order to get us to do that, a ton of marketing and image strategy type stuff is applied in both forms. It feels like sometimes maybe people acknowledge all that image stuff a lot more in movies than music. Which makes sense, because when you think of the concepts of them, when you zoom out, you're like, okay, a movie, I sit and I look at it the whole time, and music, I just listen to it. But I think that's starting to become an outdated way to see these forms. Because with the world that we live in today, I think the two things are starting to look more and more like each other. We stream shows from home the same way that we stream music, which means they sit there and they try to convince us to click on them. And we see musicians more than we hear them sometimes, thanks to TikTok and Instagram. Just some food for thought. I don't know how different these two things are anymore. So that's my takeaway on it. Let me know what you guys think, if you agree with me, if you think I'm a dumb, stupid idiot, and let me know what I should cover next. Peace.